Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be checking out the Emax Babyhawk R. Now I know it might seem that I'm a little bit behind the times with this one and that it's been out for quite a while. However, if you look at the dates, it's not been out that long. I think it was created in the USA and they got pilots to fly it and they sent out very early pre-release versions to all of the USA reviewers, but we didn't get any in Europe, and that was back in December, so we're only 2 months in and it seems like an old model already. That's how this industry works. But I managed to get hold of one. I went to all of my usual contacts and it was only GearBest that would send me one. Now say what you want about GearBest, they always deliver for reviewers in sending the latest products out there, so thanks to them for sending this guy out to me. So this is the official release version and this is the box that it comes in. Here you can see we've got the logo on there and it's got the PNP 2-inch. There's also a 3-inch option there. However, I haven't seen the 3-inch option be released yet, and I know Albert got to check out the 2.5-inch arms for it. And this is a problem that I've got straight away with this model. The fact that they've tried to make it so it can be versatile, so you can swap the arms out, and there's been a huge trade-off with this, and that is the weight. This thing is so heavy for a 2-inch model. Now the instructions say that it weighs 82 grams. That's not true at all. It's weighing 90 grams. And I thought, well, maybe it's the motors that's making it heavy. But then I realized I've already built a 2-inch model with these motors. This is the Flex RC 2-inch Ascent. And this guy is almost 20 grams lighter. I think it comes in at 70 grams. This one, 90 grams. And the weight is all down to the arms. So the arms are removable. I think on the pre-release version, they were split into individual arms. Now, this piece of carbon is linked up, and so is this one. So if you break an arm, you have to replace both of these. However, all of this extra carbon in order to do that and all of the screws has meant that it's really heavy, a little bit too heavy compared to the competitors. And I know when this guy first came out, it was released at a similar time to the GTR 90 from Diatone, and I was getting a lot of questions, which one should you go for? This one is 20 grams lighter, and when you think about that, that is the weight of a split Mini. I know they are more powerful motors, but I think if they'd have gone for a unibody, they could have saved a lot more weight, and I do believe they are working on a unibody for the 2.5-inch. That's a good way to go, I think, because I think this is just a little bit too heavy. To combat it, they've gone higher up in pitch on the props. These have some serious pitch on them. It actually doesn't detail what the pitch is. If you know the pitch of these props, just put it down in the comments there, because they say it's a 2.2-inch pitch, but what is that in size? It should be a 2.0 something, like a 2.050 or something like that. Let me know in the comments, because I couldn't find any information on that. But yes, they are a Avan prop, I think they're called, a 4-blade. So it's going to have loads of power, but it's going to draw loads of amps, and with this weight and a 450 milliamp to a 550 milliamp battery, whether that's 3S or 4S, you're going to get really short flight times. Well, that's what I'm predicting anyways. So what I think they should do is bring out a unibody. Yeah, you'd have to disconnect all of this and things, but it's going to make it a whole lot lighter. That being said, it does seem like a really nice package, so let's take a look at the specifications and what I think about it. So the motors are a 1106 6000 kV. As I say, they're the same motors that I've used before, very powerful. And then we've got this core here, so it's a 4-in-1 ESC. It is running BLHeli-S 16.6, so if you want to do D-Shock commands, then you're going to have to upgrade it to 16.7. Not difficult to do, just through the USB port there. Then the flight controller is a Omnibus F3, so you can't do your Kalman filters on it if you're interested in that. The whole thing does seem to be soft mounted here. We've got some rubber grommets there for the whole stack. And of course that is running Betaflight on-screen display. It's come flash with version 3.22, but I imagine that will change depending on when you bought this thing. And then above that we have got the VTX. It's a switching VTX between 25 milliwatt and 200 milliwatt. It's a 40 channel, and you've got this little LED on the top here that tells you the different bands and channels. One thing that I thought was a bit of a pain is the button's not quite easy to get to. I've had to take this hex driver and sort of just jam it under there. The way that it works is that the button does nothing until you hold it down for 5 seconds. You then get a menu that says the power level, the channel, and the band. For some reason the band is like a funny icon, like a 4 or something like that. I don't know why. But then it's a 2-second press to go in each one of those. So you've got high and low on the power output, and then you've got your 8 individual channels and the bands that you can go through as well for the 40 channels. So yeah, and then that has a micro UFL connector, and that's got some adhesive on there to stop it coming off. One thing I thought was interesting is the sleeve dipole antenna that comes back here. It does look like they designed a hole for it to go through up here, but I think they've chosen not to have it through there because it covers up the LED. You've also got a hole here as well if you want to use a single antenna, but I'm using a XM Plus here, so I've routed my antennas out the side here with some cable ties. There's some holes here, so that was quite nice. But personally, I think they should have had another hole back here and had this sticking out nice and snug at the back, because it could easily hit the props here. And yeah, you could reroute it through up here, but I reckon this will be pressing against the LED up here, and you probably also have to loosen this adhesive that they've put on the UFL connector as well. Just small things, but it seems like a really easy fix. I don't know why they didn't do anything about it. So, as this is the PNP version, I've had to solder a receiver. It came with the 3 wires coming from the flight controller, so your signal, your positive, and your ground, and I've just soldered in a XM Plus there. Very easy to do. And then at the front, we have got a really nice camera. It's a branded camera, so it's a Foxier camera, unlike the one on the Diatome, which isn't branded at all. And we've got a wide-angle lens on there. You can see, though, that the angle of the camera is restricted. It's probably at 15 degrees, maybe 10 at the lowest. You could cut away some of this cowling to get it a little bit lower, but you know, you'd be ruining the canopy. Maybe if you've got a Dremel on there or something like that. As it's a Foxier camera, it's got the little on-screen display adapter, and in the box you are given the little controller for that. And while we're on the subject of the box, you're given a JST connector if you don't have any XT30s. It's a nice touch, I suppose. You've got a load of spare screws in there and a load of spare screws here as well. I really like that. And we've got a spare set of these propellers in there as well, but you're not given a battery, of course. So for the battery, I'm going to be using one of these GNB 550 mAh 3S batteries. It will take a 4S, but as we discovered with the Diatone, it didn't really benefit that much on a 2-inch, so it's probably going to be best to use a 3S with this, and yeah, a little bit of a gimmick on a 4S because it makes it even heavier, so you have to go down smaller in the size and your flight time's really short. I'm expecting a really short flight time with this guy anyways. So then if we come out to the side, this was something that I always thought was a bit of a problem. It is a low ESR capacitor, probably just for video noise, but it can also clean up noise to the gyro as well. But with this being an F3 with the MPU 6000, I don't think that's what it's doing, so it's probably just cleaning up the video. I think it's 330 microfarads. Let me just check on there. I'm not sure if it actually says. Let's turn it around. Yeah, there we go. It is, yeah, 25 volt, 330. And I can see some space down here. And that would have been so easy just to reroute round here, and I'm sure many people who've got one of these have done that. Yeah, I suppose it's protected by the frame, but I can see that getting knocked off. So to me, that could have been put inside, I think, for the final release, but it seems like they haven't. So one thing that is pretty nice about this guy is it's set up quite nicely in Betaflight. I still changed a couple of things. I moved the on-screen display around. It was set up to have the RSSI on the AUX 5, but this XM Plus that I've got doesn't have the RSSI firmware flash to it, so I had to disable that and move around the on-screen display. I changed the rates around, but I'm going to leave the PIDs because supposedly this guy has been tuned by pilots, which is rare, you know, so that's a reason to buy into this, is that, you know, people have actually tuned it. I think they've even gone in there and turned some of the notch filters off as well, so I hear that it does fly pretty good. My only real sort of peeve with it, again, is the weight. For example, this is one of my favourite micros at the moment. It's running a 2.5 inch prop. It's the Mini Fight. I absolutely love this, and it weighs 90 grams, the same as this guy does with its 2-inch props on. So I think if you are buying into one of these, or if you already have one, then I think it's definitely going to be worth waiting for them to release the 2.5 inch version, because I watched Albert Kim's video on that, and he basically said that it even made it lighter with the bigger arms, which should never be the case. So I think from the get-go they should have just tried to make one decent 2-inch quadcopter than attempting to make 2 or 3 variations of a just okay but slightly heavy quadcopter. I'm really happy that they're looking at the unibody, because even though you will have to replace the entire bottom if you break an arm, it's going to be so much lighter and you might get a longer flight time and better performance. So to take the canopy off to get to the receiver, you've got all of these screws here, and I would strongly recommend that you take these 2 screws out. I think they are 1.5mm hex screws, so these 2 back ones, and I would then take these 2 out here for the camera, just because these ones at the front here, these 3, they've got a little nut that is recessed into this part here, and you end up having to take the camera apart anyways to get to the nuts to put it all back together. So if you just undo these 2 here and these 2, you can take the whole thing off. The camera does come out, of course. I was hoping that you could just undo these back 2, loosen these and lift it up like a sort of hood or bonnet or whatever you want to call it, but that wasn't the case. It seems to be locked into this system here, so you have to completely take these screws out. So for the control, it's going to be my usual setup of the FreeSky X10S, and then for FPV, I'm using the Dominator HD3s with a Menace linear antenna. That's important for these linear antennas on here. And then we've got a Onway Cloverleaf and a Furious FPV True Diversity system on the goggles. Okay, let's go for the Maiden. It is properly windy out here today, which is not ideal. So I'm just in angle mode. Now they say that this one has been tuned, but when I look at the values, the tune does look very similar to the stock. So I'm not hearing any vibrations at the moment though. Oh, another thing I should mention as well, it does have a beeper on board. Also has a nice silicon battery mat. I've had to change the values of angle mode. It was set to 25. I've changed that to 50, just my preference. Let's see what the punch is like. Just as I suspected, plenty of punch there. Had to compensate for the wind. Seems like it's behaving fine. Gone into acro. Kind of difficult to hear with the wind going, but I'm not hearing any major oscillations or vibrations. Yeah, quite unusual values for a micro carrying a 3S. Usually I have to go quite low with the gains, but not the case with this one. Might be because of that extra weight that it's carrying, but it doesn't feel like a heavy copter, I have to say. Must be those propellers. Yeah, plenty of performance there. Imagine how it would perform if it was a tiny bit lighter. I like it. I like it a lot. Have to see what it's like on the FPV, see what the flight time is like. Oh yeah, it maneuvers nicely. It's fast as well. Really having to compensate for that wind in my maneuvers though, and that's going to be the same for the FPV flight. Yeah, corners really nicely. And I don't see any initial issues with the tune, and really I shouldn't do if it's been flown. Okay, well I think the line of sight test is passed at least. Let's flick it back into angle mode and see if there's any drifting. I don't see any. Yeah, absolutely fine. Okay, let's come in for a landing and I'll do some FPV with it. So, are you ready to listen to me eat my own words? This thing flew absolutely amazing out of the box. One of the best micros out of the box, I have to say. It really has made a difference giving it to actual pilots. You can see there on the hesitation backflips, no bounce back whatsoever, and I think quadcopter companies should take note of this. Now, I did think that the gains were very similar to stock, and it's not a completely perfect tune, I have to say. At the top of the throttle, it was getting a couple of wobbles, and I don't think that was from vibrations. I think it was from the P gain being slightly too high. In fact, this copter might benefit from some throttle PID attenuation, because yeah, some slight wobbles at the top of the throttle, some slight hesitations, but in general I was happy with the tune, and I didn't really want to mess around with it because wow, it was a really windy day out there today, and it made the flight look slow, but it's not. It's just into wind then. It's just so strong that it's getting blown back, and you can't see it through the copter other than it looking slow, because yeah, the tune's just absolutely fantastic. And I think that's important to a lot of people. You see, I read in the comments a lot of the time that people are getting so fed up receiving these RTF copters and they're not tuned, and they don't want to sit in beta flight and have to mess with all the settings. And if that is the case for you, this copter is for you. It's brilliant. And I was worried about the flight time. I thought I'd get a really low flight time, but with these 550 milliamp batteries, I was getting consistently over a 3-minute flight time. I think if you pushed it, then you could get a 2-minute flight time. But the way that I fly, I was happy with the flight time. So yeah, I hope people are going to watch to the end of this video, because it's a complete change for me. And if I was to answer the question, which one do I prefer? Is it the Babyhawk R or the GTR 90? I actually now think I would go for this one. Look how clean that video is. It's brilliant. It's got a far better tune out of the box, and it's set up nicely out of the box as well. Now, I still do think that if they came out with a unibody for it, they could make it even lighter and it would perform even better. So, Emax, if you're watching this video, please do that, because I think it would improve upon this model even more. But yeah, I was really happy with it, and it seems like that extra bit of weight, the 20 grams almost, doesn't seem to affect the flight time too much. It probably affects the punch for sure, but with how well it flies, I wasn't too bothered about that. You know, we're not you know, drag racing with these things, you know. So yeah, I was impressed with it. So thanks to GearBest for sending this in for review. I'll put a link in the description if you wish to get one. And as you can see, over a 3-minute flight time there. I'm really pushing it. I'll come in for a landing. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.